Sometimes, the hardest person to forgive is yourself, I whispered as rain pelted the windshield, each drop slicing through the night like tiny glass needles. Ethan Blackwell sat in the driver's seat of his sleek black sedan, hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white beneath the dim glow of the streetlights. The city was quiet at this hour, almost too quiet, as if it knew something was shifting in the air. Across the intersection, a lone figure appeared under the flickering lamppost, Claire Matthews, her coat drenched, hair plastered to her face, clutching a worn backpack like it contained every memory she refused to let go. My heart twisted at the sight, the memory of every mistake I had made flooding back, each one heavier than the last. I pressed the brake, tires screeching softly against the asphalt, and the engine hummed like it was holding its breath, waiting for my next move. Claire glanced up, catching the glint of my eyes through the rain-streaked glass, and for a moment the world contracted to the space between us. Every step she took toward me was measured, cautious, yet there was a determination in her green eyes that made me rethink every choice that had led me here. I wanted to speak, to reach out, but the words lodged in my throat, a lump of regret I couldn't swallow. The streetlights reflected off the puddles, mirroring the storm inside me, and I realized that tonight would be the first of many moments where I would have to confront who I had been, who I was, and who I wanted to become. Her gaze didn't waver as she closed the distance, and the city seemed to fade, leaving only the rain, the asphalt, and the weight of decisions long overdue. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the streets glistening like black glass under the yellow haze of streetlights. Ethan stepped out of his sedan, the cold air seeping through his coat, pressing against his skin, reminding him that he was alive, that every breath was a chance to make a different choice. Claire hesitated, her boots splashing in shallow puddles, hands tightening around the straps of her backpack, as if it were a shield against everything she did not yet understand. He watched her carefully, noting the subtle tension in her shoulders, the quickening pulse visible even in the dim light, and he knew that this first interaction would define everything that followed. There was a distance between them, invisible but palpable, filled with unspoken words, mistakes of the past, and the fragile hope of something better. Ethan took a deliberate step forward, then another, careful not to rush, allowing the rhythm of the city and the soft patter of rain to fill the silence with something almost musical. Claire looked up, meeting his eyes, and for a brief moment, recognition sparked between them, not of familiarity, but of shared understanding that life could change in an instant. His voice broke the quiet, steady and calm. "You do not need to be afraid." The words were simple, yet carried a weight he had never felt before, as if speaking them could absolve him of some small fraction of the guilt he carried. Claire blinked, uncertainty warring with the flicker of trust in her gaze, and Ethan realized that this night, this encounter, was the beginning of something neither of them could have anticipated, a fragile bridge between past regret and the possibility of redemption. Claire hesitated on the sidewalk, the puddles reflecting the flickering streetlights, and Ethan kept his distance, letting her set the pace, the rhythm of their movements synchronized with the gentle drizzle that had returned. He noticed the slight tremor in her hands, the way she adjusted the strap of her backpack as if it could shield her from the weight of the night, and struck him how much care he wanted to offer without overstepping. "It is going to be all right," he said, voice low, steady, carrying a calm he had cultivated through years of control and mistakes. Claire tilted her head, uncertainty in her green eyes, searching for meaning in his words, and Ethan realized that this was more than an encounter. It was the first step in rebuilding trust. As they walked together toward the edge of the park, the soft glow of distant lampposts outlined the contours of the city, a maze of concrete and glass that seemed to hold their secret within its folds. Every step she took was measured, careful, but there was courage in her stride, a willingness to confront something new despite the shadows of past disappointments. Ethan kept silent, allowing the space between them to carry its own weight, the quiet punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic and the gentle tapping of rain on leaves. He could feel the tension in her body, a mix of wariness and curiosity, and he understood that every gesture, every word from him, would be a test of his sincerity. Claire glanced at him, a fleeting smile breaking through the apprehension, and Ethan felt the fragile spark of hope that tonight might mark the first chapter of something neither of them had expected, a connection forming where only distance and regret had existed before. The streets were slick with the remnants of rain, the air heavy with the scent of damp asphalt, and the faint glow of neon signs reflecting off puddles. Ethan and Claire moved cautiously along the sidewalk, the city around them hushed, almost as if it was holding its breath for what was about to unfold. She kept her eyes ahead, yet flickers of curiosity betrayed the caution she wore like armor, and Ethan noticed every subtle movement, every hesitancy, as if memorizing the way she navigated the night. "Do you feel that?" he asked quietly, voice low enough that only she could hear. "The world seems different when you notice the details." Claire glanced at him, a hint of a smile playing at the corner of her lips, and nodded, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. They paused at the entrance to a small park, the iron gate slick and cold under Ethan's fingertips as he pushed it open, allowing her to step through first. The trees swayed gently above them, leaves glistening with the last drops of rain, casting dancing shadows that flickered across their path. Every step she took seemed deliberate, measured, a quiet courage shining through the uncertainty. Ethan kept a careful distance, letting her lead, the silence between them rich with meaning, broken only by the distant hum of the city and the soft rustle of leaves. He could sense the wall she had built, yet he also felt the small openings, moments where trust could seep in. She looked back briefly, eyes searching his, and he offered a steady, reassuring gaze, a silent promise that tonight would not be about fear, but about the tentative first steps toward understanding, connection, and the slow unraveling of past regrets. The park was quiet now, the distant hum of the city fading into a soft backdrop as Ethan and Claire moved deeper along the winding path, the glow of lampposts casting elongated shadows that danced across the wet ground. The air was crisp, filled with the subtle scent of damp leaves and earth, a gentle reminder of the night's calm after the earlier rain. Claire paused beside a bench, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and Ethan noticed the way she hesitated before sitting, as if measuring the trust in the space between them. "You have been carrying more than you should," he said softly, voice steady but warm, a stark contrast to the hardness he had known in himself for so long. Claire looked at him, green eyes wide, a mixture of surprise and the faintest hint of relief reflecting in their depth. He knelt slightly to meet her gaze, careful to keep the distance respectful, allowing her to feel control over the moment. The city lights shimmered through the trees, creating a mosaic of illumination that seemed to separate this small corner from the rest of the world, a place suspended in time. Ethan reached out his hand, not to impose, but as an offering, a gesture of support, and Claire lifted her own hand, brushing against his in the quietest acknowledgement of connection. Every step, every glance, carried meaning, unspoken words weaving a fragile bridge of understanding. The night stretched around them, intimate in its stillness, and for the first time since the encounter began, there was a sense that what had started as an accidental crossing of paths could become something intentional, a mutual exploration of trust, reflection, and the cautious opening of hearts that had long been guarded. The moon had risen higher, casting a pale silver light over the park, highlighting the gentle sway of the trees and the glimmering reflections in the puddles beneath their feet. Ethan and Claire walked slowly along. The path, the air crisp and still, carrying the faint scent of rain-soaked earth. He could see her exhale, a subtle release of tension that mirrored his own, a quiet acknowledgement of the distance they had traveled together in these few moments. "You do not need to face everything alone," Ethan said softly, voice calm and deliberate, each word measured as if it could heal a fragment of the past. Claire glanced at him, green eyes catching the moonlight, a mixture of hesitation and curiosity reflected in their depth. She nodded slightly, the smallest of gestures, yet it carried weight, signaling that she had heard him, that she might allow herself to lean on this connection. Ethan kept his gaze steady, attentive to the nuances of her expression, the slight curl of her lips, the way her fingers clutched her coat as if seeking comfort. The sounds of the city were distant now, replaced by the quiet rustle of leaves and the gentle drip of water from branches above, forming a rhythm that matched the slow, deliberate pace of their steps. Every movement, every glance, was imbued with meaning, a conversation without words unfolding in the shared space. Ethan sensed the fragile trust beginning to form, delicate yet resilient, a subtle but undeniable shift in the air that suggested tonight would mark a turning point, a moment where past regrets and cautious hope could coexist, guiding them toward the possibility of understanding and attentive, mutual connection. The night had deepened, the city lights casting a soft glow that reflected off the wet pavement, creating a pattern of gold and silver beneath their feet. Ethan and Claire reached a small stone bridge, the quiet trickle of water beneath providing a gentle rhythm that seemed to slow time around them. She leaned lightly against the railing, shoulders squared yet relaxed, and Ethan observed the subtle shift in her posture, the momentary letting down of the defenses she had carried so carefully. "Sometimes we hold on to what hurts us because it feels familiar," he said, voice measured and calm, each word deliberate, inviting reflection without pressure. Claire turned her gaze to the water, watching ripples spread across the surface, and Ethan sensed the thoughts she kept hidden, the fears and doubts that had followed her like shadows. He stepped closer, careful to respect the space she had claimed, and offered a gentle, encouraging smile, the kind that carried reassurance without expectation. The night air was cool, brushing against their faces and mixing with the faint scent of rain, grounding them in the present. Every glance between them, every quiet breath shared in the silence of the bridge, carried a weight of unspoken understanding, a bridge between hesitation and trust forming in the space between them. Claire finally turned to meet his eyes, a flicker of acknowledgement in her gaze, and Ethan felt the subtle shift in their connection, the beginning of a moment where fear gave way to cautious hope, and the past, with all its shadows and regrets, seemed a little less heavy under the quiet promise of what might come next. The first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, softening the edges of the city and turning the wet streets into ribbons of gold and silver. Ethan and Claire paused at the edge of the park, the cool morning air carrying a faint scent of earth and rain, and for a moment, they simply stood, letting the quiet stretch between them. Claire's gaze drifted to the distant skyline, taking in the gentle awakening of the city, and Ethan watched her, noticing the way the light touched her hair, the subtle relaxation in her shoulders, the trust beginning to bloom in her eyes. "It is never too late to start again," he said, voice low and deliberate, each word chosen carefully to carry hope without pressure. Claire turned to him, the green of her eyes reflecting the first hints of sunlight, and nodded, the smallest movement yet one that carried enormous weight. They began walking together, side by side, the rhythm of their steps slow, deliberate, measured, as if syncing to the heartbeat of the city itself. Every sound, the distant hum of traffic, the rustle of leaves, the soft drip of remaining raindrops, became part of the backdrop to a shared moment of understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of the fragility and potential of what lay ahead. Ethan kept his gaze on her, steady, attentive, aware that this was the moment where intentions became action, where past regrets could be acknowledged and released, and where the tentative bridge of trust they had built through the night solidified into something tangible, a promise of redemption and connection that neither of them could have anticipated, yet both now quietly embraced. The sun had risen fully now, spilling golden light across the city streets and illuminating the damp sidewalks with a warmth that promised new beginnings. Ethan and Claire walked side by side, their footsteps steady and synchronized, a quiet rhythm that mirrored the shift in their hearts. The cool morning air carried the faint scent of coffee from nearby cafes and the distant hum of early traffic, grounding them in the present. Claire glanced at Ethan, a soft smile breaking through, the hesitancy that had marked the night replaced with a tentative trust that spoke volumes. "You have come far already," he said, voice calm, deliberate, carrying the weight of acknowledgement and the quiet pride of someone who has learned to change. She nodded, the green of her eyes reflecting determination and the subtle recognition of the journey they had shared. Every glance, every small gesture, held a layered meaning, a conversation built from unspoken understanding and shared experience. The city around them seemed to pause, the usual rush of activity replaced by a gentle awareness, as if granting them this moment of clarity and renewal. Ethan felt the past regrets loosen their grip, the shadows of previous mistakes fading as he absorbed the significance of the present connection. Claire stepped closer, her pace unhurried, allowing the trust between them to solidify without force. The golden light glinted on the pavement, shimmering through the lingering puddles, and in that quiet, unassuming clarity, Ethan understood that redemption was not an event but a process, a series of intentional steps that could lead to something lasting. Together, they continued forward, not as individuals defined by past errors, but as two people capable of moving toward hope, understanding, and the quiet promise of shared moments that might define the rest of their days.